Hi, everybody. It's Tim Hagen, and I wanted to share with you. I think one of the things that causes us the greatest discord in our workplaces. And I think about everything that goes on in our companies, and we talk about values and principles and team building. We talk about all these tactical things. I want to share with you something that was just so interesting to me. Right before the 4th of July, I went up to my wife and I took a vacation, and I was in a meeting, I'd say for about 2 hours. And it was about, I'd say about 75 minutes of real meeting time. There was idle chit chat, and then we took a break halfway through. And I counted, and I'm looking down at my notes, 27 acts of discord from, are you kidding? 27 acts of discord during what should have been a strategic conversation. Here is the missing piece that I think is something we don't talk about. We know it happens. We try to correct it. We try to fix it. We try to talk to people about it, yet it requires practice. Let me share with you what it is. It's our ability to emotionally interpret. So think about this. The fundamental difference is our reactions say everything about us because our emotional interpretation really is our reaction to something that's said to us. So if I go up to somebody and I say, you know what, Joanne, at times, you really come off brisk, you come off rude and really terse. In that moment, that hypothetical person has got a choice of reacting. Most people, 9 out of 10 people will say, no, I wasn't. That's not what I meant. And we defend ourselves. We emotionally react. We want to be in the right versus someone saying, wow, how did that come off? Help me understand where that occurred. Let me see what I can do to adjust that going forward. Or what do I need to do to correct that? Here's the funny thing. When we are coaching, when we are discussing, when we're working with people, think about constructive feedback. I love to crack this joke, and I've cracked it before on our Wednesday workshops, is that often you'll see employees do this. And we as leaders get lulled to sleep like, wow, they really agree with me. No, they're nodding off. They're going to sleep. They can't wait to get the heck out of your office. So we have to be very, very insistent on one thing. People react based on agreement or disagreement. So how do I know this? Get a Republican, get a Democrat together, have them have lunch. Do you know what their intent always is? Is to change the other person, to prove to them why their views are wrong. And it's so interesting. We're all guilty of it, right? So when we think about what happens in the workplace, think about emotional interpretation. Think about somebody right now. I love to nickname this person, yeah, but Bob. They already know you're wrong before you even get to the end of your first or second sentence. Or do you have that friend or that person who goes, or they start to, if they disagree with you, they start looking at their phone? I mean, it's so interesting. We tend to interpret things emotionally. Now, I'm going to share something with you with a family member that I had. And I won't say who because I could get in trouble. Is the person goes, well, I'm just stubborn. And I said, what does that mean? Well, that's just the way I am. I said, oh, interesting. I said, so do you think people who are stubborn can become less stubborn? Person goes, well, it's a personality trait. It's not my question. Do you think someone can become less stubborn? Person said, well, yeah, kind of. And I'm literally mimicking the tone I got. It was an emotional thing. And I said, so when you say it's just who you are, here's what I've heard. Here's what I'm interpreting from you. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I stayed really calm. You're choosing not to become less stubborn. The person goes, oh, that's not what I said. And they got very volatile. And I said, wait a minute. You seem really upset. I'm trying to understand, because when something is said to you and you become perception-wise dismissive and according to you stubborn because that's who you are, is that what we're going to get all the time? Just let me know. The person didn't want to commit to that, but they didn't want to commit to becoming less stubborn. It's so interesting. So what we tend to do is we tend to react based on agreement or disagreement. I'll give you another case in point. I have a really good friend whose son went to high school and college with my son. And she would always tell me how she went up to the high school, she went up to the sports coaches, and she always had to talk to him. I said, why? She goes, well, don't you? I said, never have. I've never gone to a teacher. I have never gone to a coach, ever. I said, the only time I think I went to a coach was to get clarification on something. But I said, I've never talked about playing time, never talked about grades, ever. And she said, well, how can you do that? I said, how can I not do that? I'm not in the classroom. I'm not at the practices. Now, are there times it's frustrating to see things, how they evolve for our kids or, our teammates and our coworkers? Absolutely. And I said, why do you go? And I want you to really hear this. I want you to hear this, and you're going to end up, not at the end of this session. In about 2 weeks, you're going to call me or send me an email and say, Tim Hagen, I can't stand you because you've planted the seed. Now I'm looking for it, and I've become obsessed with it. People tend to react with, as this friend did, well, I just felt so. So when someone says, I felt, what they're leading with is an emotional reaction that typically interprets the feedback or the information that was provided to them. And I'll never forget the conversation. It was about 9, 10 years ago, about 8 years ago. Our kids were in high school, and she said that her son got a grade that she didn't agree with. And I said, oh, what class? And she said, English. And I said, okay. I said, what grade did he get? Well, he got a B plus. And I said, okay. I said, why do you think he deserves some type of an A? Well, I just think it was really unfair the way she graded it. Notice the reaction. I didn't ask that. I asked, why did he deserve an A? Well, I didn't agree with the way she graded it. Well, what do you mean? Well, he's such a good writer. She was not answering my questions, which means she was reacting emotionally. And I said, can I ask you a factual question? Now, you want to be careful with this. So when someone's emotional, I tend to get very calm and factual. I said, when you went there, what is your background in English? And she just looked at me. She said, what do you mean? I said, what's your background? What's your educational background? And she just sat there. And she said, well, I don't have one. I said, oh, okay. I said, would you go up to my wife, who's a doctor, and say she's doing everything wrong with the medication she's prescribing? She said, of course not. I said, well, why? You answered that really quick. And she said, because I don't have that. And she stopped. And she said, well, Tim, it's just hard to watch your kid. I said, I'm not saying it's not hard to watch your kid. I'm wondering if you're reacting emotionally or logically. She said, yeah, probably emotionally. I said, yeah, I've done it too. I said, we all react emotionally. And it's interesting, right? So what do we do with it? What do we do with this? How do we get better at this? My advice is to practice these conversations. Here's how. When you have people who emotionally interpret, one, have them seek feedback. That way they get feedback in their own terms. And we've talked about this in prior sessions. Number two, and I think this is the greatest self-awareness technique that every organization should have every employee doing, is having people just say thank you. And I get it all the time. Well, what if I agree or disagree? I don't care. Just say thank you. And someone said, yeah, but that doesn't solve anything. I said, actually, it solves something that's huge. You get to calmly stay in the moment. It absolves you from feeling like you have to react because you're conditioned. You've told yourself, you coach yourself to do what? To not respond. Then you ask that person, or you have them ask themselves 2 self-awareness questions. Number 1, what have you learned about yourself that you're positively committed to improving? I'm telling you right now, I just did this at a client site. Once you have someone reflect and not answer in the moment, removing the emotional interpretation and reaction, people in that moment, when they answer the question, whether it's given to them or we encourage them to ask them themselves of this, it's at that moment they have that aha moment, like, yeah, I'm not as volatile right now. I'm not as emotional, because in the moment when someone gives you feedback, when someone shares something you don't like, guess what happens? People react emotionally. Think about divorced parents. What do they do when they get divorced? They decide to call it quits. Well, we're going to co-parent. We're going to be a united front. Very rarely does that happen because they react emotionally to each other. So, number one, teach people to seek feedback. Number two, have people just say thank you. Number three, have them answer two self-awareness questions. What have you learned about yourself you're positively committed to improving? Number two, what steps are you going to take to pursue that positive improvement? That's the action. That's the change agent. Last, we have to nurture this. We have to facilitate these practice sessions. Here's one of the greatest things that really draws attention to emotional interpretation and reaction. If you don't know what a 360 is, a leadership 360 or a 360 assessment is where if you're in a group of 6 people, 5 other people will give you feedback, or 10 people. Maybe there's 6 of the 10 that will give you feedback based on what you do well and not so well. Now, if you don't roll that out carefully, now the answers are anonymous, but what typically happens, and I bet you some of you have done 360s are nodding and laughing right now, or maybe you're going to put yes into the chat, is we tend to do what? We tend to think about who said it versus what was said. We tend to think about who is the person who said this versus what they said. We don't typically get constructive feedback and say, what can I learn to alter that perception? We typically get triggered to do what? Dismiss or accept the feedback based on our agreement or disagreement. Here's the funny thing. We've talked about it in prior sessions. The goal of feedback is never to give feedback. The goal of feedback is to give it to somebody who receives it well and strategically utilizes it. If, for whatever reason, someone cannot do that, they will typically react emotionally. Now, this is where I'm going to plant a seed with you and you're going to not like me in about 2 weeks. Maybe you don't like me now. So when you are talking to people, watch the reaction. I'm telling you right now, it is one of the greatest things you can do is just to sit back, pull up a newspaper, and just watch people talk. You know, it's kind of like a poker game. If you don't know anything about poker, people have tells. So when someone has, a really good hand, someone might rub their hands, or if someone doesn't have a good hand and they tend to tilt their shoulder, those are tells. When we have conversations, we have tells. I have a friend, when they do not like what they're hearing, they tend to pull out their phone and they start to dismiss you. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's a triggered reaction. So every conversation molds our teams. Every conversation develops or breaks relationships. Every conversation will typically trigger people to react. We are emotional creatures. We don't typically calmly say, provide me some constructive feedback that will really get me out of my comfort zone. And I promise to accept it thoughtfully. It's tough, right? I bet you're laughing as I do that. It even felt funny doing that because I'm a pretty happy, hyper guy. So emotional interpretation is about how we react to things and how we're triggered. What if we practice those conversations? So I share this on another Wednesday workshop. If you're new here, or if you've been in the prior ones, bear with me. I want to tell this story again. Standing right behind a person at a manufacturing plant, one of our client sites, team leader, talking to the plant managers, not even giving constructive feedback, just giving directions on something that needed to be done. And the person walked away, went to the lunchroom. I had followed her, not to follow her, but just go down and grab a soda. And she proceeded to tell 3 people how the plant manager attacked her. Now you think about the word attacked. Did somebody think, gosh, did he grab her? Did he throw a punch? Did he slap her? Attack's a pretty aggressive word. And I was shocked because I was right there. I was standing next to them when they had the conversation. And so I did one of these and I leaned in front of her and she saw me and she goes, oh, I didn't know you were there. I said, would that change the story you're providing right now? And when she was talking to 3 people, the 3 people kind of slowly walked away. And she said, well, I just felt it. I said, no. Answer the question. I'm breaking you down. You just told 3 people who just walked away that he attacked you. They're going to go tell 3 other people. do you think trust is really important? She said, well, of course I do. And I said, one of those three people are going to tell somebody who's going to say it to the plant manager. And she got really red and she got embarrassed. And I said, so why did you give that interpretation? She said, well, I just felt like he's always telling me what to do. I said, so what if he is? Well, I'm just mad. I think it's unfair. I said, so how did that become an attack? She goes, it probably wasn't. I said, so you've interpreted this, re-engineered, retold reality. So your interpretation became your reality that you just told three people. Do you think they're going to say that concisely to three other people? Now there's going to be 9 versions out there. Do you think they're going to be really accurate? She said, no. I said, you've got something to do. She said, I will go talk to him. Now, by the way, great person, has grown tremendously. She was having a bad day. In that moment, it just triggered her. And then it manifested itself into gossipy rumors, which to her credit, she stopped eventually. The point being is in that moment, she took, I need you to do XYZ, directive, not constructive feedback. And she turned it into, I was attacked. And I was stunned. And then when she saw that I was there, she knew exactly what I was going to do. She knew exactly what she had done. She knew that she took it out of context. She knew what she did was unfair because she wasn't acting rationally. By the way, great employee, great person, awesome to work with. She had her moment. And I said, think about that moment. Think about moments in your company. So when we think about emotional interpretation, our reactions, watch people when they're talking to each other. In that meeting before the July 4th holiday, in that meeting, 27 acts of discord in 2 hours that I counted. People going like this when someone's talking, folding their arms, looking away, pulling out their phone. When we don't like what we hear, we do what? We shut down. My family member, I'm always stubborn. I mean, that's how it was said. Well, I'm just stubborn. That's who I am. So we're really what that person was saying is, that's my permission to continue to behave that way, whether you like it or not. Is that really a rational, logical thing? No, it's an emotional thing. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. When someone gives me feedback on something and I've worked really hard on it, in that moment, sometimes I feel defensive, especially with the work that I do. And it's not a great thing to share, but it's about us becoming self-aware. See, that the major tenet of emotional intelligence is self-awareness and self-regulation. I think underneath both of those is emotional interpretation. If we can get people practicing thoughtful mindfulness, reflection, deep breaths in the moment, and ask themselves, how have I created that perception? What can I do to embrace this feedback? Notice I did not say agree or disagree. So that is our session for today. Now, before you log off, I want to make you aware that we have announced our 2023 Progress Coaching Summit. This is an event we're going to be doing at the Wyndham at Bonnet Creek in Orlando, Florida next year, April 17th and 18th. If you're interested, put a yes into the chat. We will get you a PDF. It's going to be a summit basically teaching 2 days of intensive how to become great leadership coaches. And in addition to that, we provide you 1 year of Progress Coaching training free and our community Progress Coaching Pods, which is a community of professionals from across companies that work together every single month, twice a month, free of charge. We even give that to you to a second person free of charge. So if you're intrigued, put a yes into the chat and we will get you that information. But again, I go back to emotional interpretation. Think about people around you. Watch the way they react. And it's tough, right? When you hear something you don't like, we want to dismiss it. Why? That's not right. They're not correct. And we dismiss it. Yet what we cut ourselves off from is, how did that person get that perception? Why are they coming from that perspective? How did we get to this place? And how can I react to that thoughtfully so I can, maintain a conversation so I can gain greater clarity? Easier said than done. Let me know your thoughts. Put it into the chat. This is a little bit of a shorter session. I actually forgot to do this one this week because I was on vacation last week. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.